Welcome to the business edition of PM Express. In recent times, there have been increasing complaints from some pension contributors about the fact that the benefits or what they are taking home is nothing to write home about. This had led to calls for reviewing the whole pensions and SNIT contribution structure to possibly deal with these problems. But is it a regulatory or a problem about the fact that people are just not contributing that much? Well, on the business edition of PM Express, you're looking at improving pensions benefits in Ghana. Is it regulation or increasing workers' pay? Well, for a program like this, you need very distinguished personalities to have a discussion like this. Dr. John Ofori-Tinkrah is the Director General of SNIT, and he is also with me in the studio here, and also the Chief Executive of the National Pensions Regulatory Authority. He is also here with me, and Leslie Dwight-York. He's a senior economist at the Institute of Fiscal Studies. We'll be doing these discussions here on the business edition of PM Express. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to the business edition of PM Express. Today we're looking at pensions. It's a subject that you often don't think about until you hit 60 years and above. Whilst you're young, you make hay while the sun shines. But this today on the business edition of PM Express, we're trying to find out why all of a sudden people out there are complaining that I'm not taking anything good when I hit retirement. Is it about regulation, or maybe I'm just not contributing enough? Well, let's try and get some understanding about what goes into pensions, and when we talk about pensions, what does it mean at all? Let the thing roll. Well, I believe that those infographics there has given you some basic understanding, but I think that the questions will still go on. What goes into the deductions of my salary? And how can I say that indeed I'm taking home something that is good, something that I'll be excited about, something that I can indeed go home and rest? Very soon we'll be linking up to Leslie Dwight-York. He is with the Institute of Fiscal Studies and a senior economist. They've done a lot of research into this area and be getting what did they find on the ground with respect to pensions in Ghana. But I have with me here Dr. Ofori-Tinkrah. He's the Director General of SNIT. Doc, thank you so much for joining us this evening on PM Express.
Thank you very much,
Doc,
George.
just help me to let's try and break these discussions down to the lowest that we can do. That when we talk about pensions contributions, what is it all about, and why is it that sometimes George will retire and like, why am I taking these peanuts home?
Well, George, thanks very much for inviting me to the show. Pensions are nothing more than a stream of payments or income that you are going to get when you leave active work. So when you stop working, you're going to live. Nowadays, God is blessing us with a lot of years. So you're going to live, if I look at you're going to live till 100.
Oh, that's great.
And in this
Thank
country,
God.
they would ask you to retire around 60. So the question is, when you've retired from active work, between after when you have retired until the good Lord calls you home, how are you going to live? And what income are you going to live on? So pensions are basically monies that you set aside, which are invested, kept in trust, invested for you, and then when you retire, we give you certain benefits or set a stream of income so that you can maintain a certain kind of lifestyle, which most often is maybe a scaled down version of what you were getting when you were in active service.
But there's a bit about who decides that at this age, maybe the law has said it. What if you go to some countries and people as old as 80, they are still working?
Yeah.
Why do you want to peg this retiring age at a certain number? Why is it not voluntary that when I think I cannot work at a certain age, I want to go home?
Okay, so in the Constitution, there is a statutory retirement age, right? And that would, by and large, I would say apply to public sector workers. You know, the government will retire you. But if you're in private work and you still want to either continue to be your teacher or you want to continue to do your private work, you can still keep on working. SNET, I must say, does not retire people. You come to us and you say you've retired, and then we look at the statute. We are a creature of statute, and it says that we can start paying retirement benefits when you are 55 and above. So you can continue working until whenever you decide to retire, and you can come to SNET and apply for your benefits. But as to why the statutory retirement age is 60, I think is a conversation that we have to have as a nation, given that people are living much longer than they were, you know, several years ago.
And I'll be getting back to the regulator. There are calls for us to look at the retiring age, even in some countries, push to 70. What does he make of it as a regulator? But again, let's get back to the basics again. So you're supposed to make some contributions as a worker for a certain number of years before you can benefit from this scheme, right? Help me out, Doc.
That is correct. The SNIT scheme is a contributory scheme. And what that means is that whilst you are in active work, there are certain deductions, pre-tax, tax-free, right, before they tax you. Those deductions are made out of your salary, and then your employer tops it up. So in this case, 5.5% of your salary is set aside.
Gross or net?
Gross.
Okay.
And then your employer would add 13% to that. It's taken out before you are taxed.
Oh, okay.
Right? And then out of that, 11% is kept at SNET.
Okay.
2.5% is used to fund the national health insurance. And then 5% of that is given to another fund manager to manage on your behalf, right? So those are the deductions, right? And then for those deductions, there's the law that governs our pensions says that if you contribute for 15 years, right, under the new law, you qualify for pension. And pension in this case means monthly payments due you until you die. Right? And the percentage of, and these payments are in a way anchored on some pensionable salary, right? And the law defines that pensionable salary as your best 3 years of earnings during your working life. Okay. Right? An average of that. So basically, we take your best 3 years and we calculate what is the average monthly salary that you earn during that period. And we're going to pay you a certain percentage of that salary until you die, indexed every year, right? So the percentage that you get starts from when you qualify at when you do 15 years, and then it maxes out when you have done like 35 years, right? And in the, under the new law, you start at 37.5% and you go to 60%, right, under the new law. So that is what you are entitled to get, in addition to other benefits that you are entitled to even when you are alive, such as if you become permanently invalid, God forbid something should happen to you and you can't work and you are declared permanently invalid, there are certain benefits that are paid to you. God forbid you die whilst you are in active service and you leave people behind, your children, your wife, your spouse, there are benefits that are supposed to be paid to you. So we have certain defined benefits that you are entitled to as a contributor, right? In exchange for the monthly deductions of 5.5% from the employer and 13% from the 5.5% from the employee and 13% from the employer.
Let me get to Leslie Mensah. He is with the Institute of Fiscal Studies. They've done a lot of research in this area in terms of pensions in Ghana. And what does the picture say about the situation, the take-home and all the rest, and whether there's a need for still more reforms or not? Leslie, if you can hear me, Leslie join us from another office with respect to Leslie. My first question to you is that what did your research actually establish in terms of pensions in Ghana?
Well, George, good evening to your guests and to your listeners. Well, we looked at two crucial aspects of any pension system. These are the issues of coverage of the target population, i.e. working people as contributors and participants in pension schemes, and then retired people as people who are out of work, and therefore require a continued means of income for their existence. And then we also did some work on the nature of pension benefits that are being paid in Ghana, particularly under the basic social security system, which is the SNCC scheme. Now, it is a crucial goal of any pension system to ensure that all persons in work are covered, meaning all persons in work should be either active contributors to a pension scheme or where there are pay-as-you-go non-contributory schemes typically provided by governments. These persons are participants in those schemes as well. Related to that is the goal of ensuring that once all persons in work have been covered in their working lives, you ensure that in their retirement they then have access to a pension, or they receive a pension, so that they can continue to survive. What we found is that in Ghana, the coverage of the working population by the pension system is rather low. In fact, our work showed that of the total employed population, just around 12% are covered by any pension scheme. And these typically are those workers that are active contributors to the SNCC scheme, as well as a minority of them that are participants in some of the pay-as-you-go schemes we have in the public sector, the CAP 30 scheme, the scheme for the armed forces, and related non-contributory schemes. So the implication is that around 88% of the employed population of Ghana is not participating in the pension system. And this, this picture reflects the widespread informality in the labor market, because our pension system has traditionally been unable to reach those that work and do business in the informal sector. And so that informality is what largely accounts for the low coverage of the population. We also investigated other dimensions of the low coverage by, for example, comparing coverage for men in work in Ghana vis-a-vis coverage for women in work in Ghana. And there we found that men in work in Ghana are twice as likely to be covered by a pension scheme as women. I mean, the ratios are about 17% for men and under 8% for women in work that are covered by a pension scheme. Again, this reflects the fact that women are more likely than men to be informally employed or engaged. And because, as I said, the pension system traditionally has been unable to reach the informal sector, it ends up, enrolling more men than women in proportion to their sizes in the labor market. What we also found, further, was that coverage tends to be higher for people in the South than people in the North. Again, reflecting the peculiar characteristics of the labor market, where people in the North tend more towards informality than people in the South. Now, when you look at the proportion of people in the retirement population, that's people age 60 and above, that receive a pension, the picture that you see mirrors the picture you find with coverage of the working population. There we saw that just about 14% of the 1.9 million people age 60 and above in Ghana, as at the end of 2018, were receiving a pension. There also we found that there are disparities along gender and regional lines, where you find that men above 60, men 60 and above are more likely to be recipients of a pension than women. In fact, thrice as likely to be recipients of a pension than women. And people above 60.
Interesting insights there, Leslie.
Yeah, George. But so these are really the highlights of what we found with respect to
interesting. I'll be coming back to you to get from you as an analyst in this set of these research, what should be the way forward in addressing all these concerns. But let me get back into my distinguished guest here, the Chief Executive of the National Pensions Regulatory Authority. It looks like the reforms that we were doing, I mean, only a few people in this country come on the pension. And when I was a kid, I heard about SNIT and Pensioners Association and HelpAge and all the rest. It looks like we still have a lot more to do in terms of regulations to improve the situation in terms of even pension coverage.
Well, thank you, George. Thanks for the opportunity. And, first of all, we need to look at the pension architecture, because from the observations that Leslie
Institute of Fiscal Studies,
I think his studies geared more towards the formal sector of the economy, and also maybe we need to look at the three-tier pension system that has been in force for nearly 10 years. And so when you take the SNIT scheme, which is the tier 1, that is mandatory. Yeah. So if you are in a working life, you would, at the end of the month, have deductions made, as John rightly indicated. It will be done mandatorily. And there is also a tier 2, which is like workplace pension or occupational pension, which will also be deducted mandatorily, because that's the law says it's also mandatory. And there is a third tier, which is voluntary, and it could be personal, it could be group, or it could be a provident fund, which is also sometimes sponsored by your employers. So that is also there. And that is one area that perhaps maybe we need to look at beyond the fact that the rest are mandatory. This is voluntary, and therefore a lot of education and sensitization needs to go in. Right now, at the end of the first quarter of 2019, we have about 158,000 schemes that are operating in the country.
Under the tier 2?
Under the tier 3.
Oh, okay.
That's the voluntary.
The informal.
The informal sector. And that has an asset under management of about 88.6 million Ghana cedis, which works at about $17 million. Of course, compared to the size of the tier 1 and tier 2, you would say this is quite small, obviously, because we need to look at the structure of the informal sector of the economy, they are very flexible, and of course they're not uniform. So the way the funds will flow in month by month in the mandatory system is not the same as it will flow in the informal sector. But there's a lot of activities, financial activities that go on in the informal sector, and that is where education and maybe financial literacy education, needs to take place. So there is a lot happening, but there's still a lot more that needs to happen.
But sir, some would say that even with the compulsory one, Doc, how's compliance like? I mean, I know there's talk about setting up a court, or allowing a court even to deal with people who don't even want to pay. I stand to be educated, Doc.
No, yeah, okay. So, you know, the people haven't quite taken advantage of the pension scheme, even the formal one, as much as they should. We just did some research about a couple of years ago, that's shortly after I came into office, and we found out that at the Registrar General's Department, approximately about 250,000 establishments are registered there. Now, granted that, let me give it to you that maybe half of these, 100,000 of these establishments are maybe dormant companies. You know, Ghana, people register companies and think that, you know, they don't operate them, right? But, so that leaves you with about maybe 150,000. SNIT currently collects from about maybe 60,000 establishments, right? So there are quite a few establishments out there. They may be a 3-man, 4-man, 5-man company or a shop that are formally registered, but they haven't enrolled onto the SNIT scheme. Now, reasons for that, I think a primary reason has been that people have not quite understood, or they have taken for granted what pensions are. And they've forgotten that one day they will grow old. In fact, a lot of people were even under the impression that pensions are for government workers, people who work for government, right? And there has been some amount of opacity or lack of clarity on what they would get even when they contribute. And there has been a narrative which, you know, unfortunately has taken root over the years, that the SNIT pension scheme is not good, you only get so little, and so on and so forth. So all these things together, and lack of aggressive public education to explain to people, have led people think that, okay, well, maybe I should invest in my children. And with my children that is going to take care of me when I get old. But you see, our society is changing. Now you have kids, and then they leave you, and they probably not
quite early age.
You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of you know, history behind pensions and the understanding of it that has led to people not taking advantage of it, and hence the low rate of compliance. Yes, we do have courts that are set up to compel employers to remit the contributions. And that's because, you know, it's a social protection problem, right? If people leave active work and they are frail and they cannot take care of themselves, it becomes a burden on the state. So in this case, the state gave us a dispensation through the Act to be able to allow us to prosecute employers who are not contributing or remitting the contributions for the workers.
Doc, how is this non-compliance by maybe a geographic company employing about 200 people and all the rest affecting the scheme, the sustainability of the scheme going forward? Because some of these people would find out that later geography wasn't doing that, and they are getting close to the 60 age. If everybody was contributing to the pool, could it have improved the situation for us in terms of for the tier 1 to ensure that contributors take what is really due them? Or it's just about an individual, and it's not an insurance where the more contributions we can pull into that?
Yeah, it is some form of an insurance. But let me answer the first question you asked, which is, you know, people don't know whether they are being the employer is
doing that, yeah,
for them or not. Interestingly, the law actually makes it binding on SNET that when you are going on retirement and you can prove that you were working and the employer did not pay, we are on the hook to pay you.
Oh, and that's good news.
Right? And that is why we have the obligation to enforce compliance, hence the dispensation, special dispensation that we have in the law courts to help us to do that, right? So when we go after employers to pay, is because we need to have you protected, right? Now, it is an insurance scheme. That's why it's not for nothing that is called Social Security and National Insurance Trust, because all the resources are pooled and we pay defined benefits. So what that means is that in a way, the benefits that you get are not specifically and uniquely tied to the contributions that you make. We may be making same contributions, but we may end up getting different benefits depending on the age we choose to retire and so many other factors, right? How our salary profiles change over the years and so on and so forth. So there is an insurance part of it, a pooling of risk. So the more people join, the more robust and sustainable the fund would be.
Let me come back to the Chief Executive of the National Pensions Regulatory Authority. And again, there are people who are still arguing that maybe the problem is regulation. You know, the laws are there. How do you ensure that the players comply? SNET, the big player, and the other players are complying to ensure that there is sanity in this industry, and when I'm going on retirement, I get what is due me.
Right. I mean, obviously, our role as regulators is to ensure that the work that people like those in SNET and also the occupational pension schemes, which are mandatory, obliged by the provisions of the Act. So that is being that's effective and robust regulatory regime that is going on to ensure that the work of SNET is done effectively, within the context of the law, and also for Tier 2, which is the occupational pension, also follow the provision of the law. I mean, from the research of Leslie and co, the issue of coverage is hindered on voluntary contribution. When it is voluntary, it becomes very difficult for regulation to take place there, because it is out of people's volition to contribute. What you do there is more education and sensitization. However, if an individual or a group of people, for that matter, decide to contribute or bring themselves into the space of pension, then regulation kicks in, because we have to make sure that their contributions, which they have voluntarily given, is invested in a way that will yield the best returns. John alluded to the fact that SNET is a defined benefit, which means that what you contribute is not directly what you're going to get as a result. But with defined contribution, as it is in the Tier 2 and the Tier 3 space, it is what you contribute and the returns that you get from investment that will determine the lump sum. So whereas John from 2020 will not be paying lump sum, but Tier 2 and Tier 3 will be paying lump sum. And therefore, the extent of our regulation will be how the funds are invested. And we are not going to only chase high return or high risk investment, but secure and safe investments which are also yielding enough return such that the value of the contribution that was made is not lost after 15 or 20 years of contribution. So the regulatory environment, I would say, is strong, but it is only for the third tier in the area of investment.
I'll come back to you on the question about getting tough on all the players and all the contributors, especially in the case of government in terms of paying contributions. Mr. Dr. Tinkra, I'll also come to you about people complaining that I paid a lot to SNET, but I'm taking home something small. But let me cross over to Leslie again, and as an analyst for you, what should be the way forward in addressing some of these problems? Do you think that regulation has to do more, or maybe looking at the numbers that you were exposed to, Maybe it's about the fact that George Rafi has to pay more in terms of his SNIT contributions or the pensions contributions.
Well, to keep the focus on the large informal sector that is uncovered, I should say that the Pensions Act of 2008, which came from the reform that was undertaken in the years prior to that enactment, does provide a framework for providing pensions to the informal sector. Okay. But to proceed in a massive way, requires the industry to understand the characteristics of the informal sector. Things like their demography, where they tend to be concentrated or work, what are their income levels, how do they save, what payment methods do they tend to use, and to share with you a few insights about their characteristics. 40% of people in the informal sector are involved in agriculture, for example. 20% are involved in trading, activities. And then you have another around 15% that are involved in household manufacturing activities, people preparing food at home, selling ice cream, etc. It's important for the industry, including the players that establish the schemes, to understand these peculiar characteristics of the informal sector. Okay. Now, while that is being done, it's important for there to be education for people in the informal sector to create the demand from their side for the pensions or for the schemes and the products. And then with the understanding of the characteristics of people in the informal sector, the players in the private sector can also design schemes and products that take into cognizance, the peculiar habits of people employed there, which will be offering the supply end, while the education offers the demand end. There have been some efforts by the MPRA, but obviously the room for improvement is massive.
I see. Leslie, I'll be coming back to you also on the question about investment as well, and whether, again, the time has come for us to look at the rules that guides investment of these pension funds. But back to my guest in studio here, Dr. Nkrank, what can be done to ensure that when I'm going home and I've contributed to the tier 1, I could smile and go home? Is anybody smiling home? Anybody that's on the pension, the tier 1, excited about what they are taking home, or everybody's complaining?
Well, I can tell you that there are some people that are smiling, but they are very few.
Why?
Those that are smiling are those that understood the scheme, the tier 1 scheme, and how it works, and took advantage of it and started contributing early. And they started contributing early, and they contributed on salaries that reflected maybe the true amounts of monies they were living on whilst they were in active service. You see, I said that the SNIT scheme is a defined benefit scheme, right? But the peculiarity of that is also that it's a defined benefit scheme, and the benefits, some of the benefits of which are hinged on the salaries on which you paid contributions. So in a way, it is sort of akin to or similar to you insuring your salary, right? So when you are in active life, you are getting certain streams of income, and you say, let me pay some premium somewhere to ensure that this stream of income that I'm getting, at least part of it continues until I meet my maker. You see what I'm saying? So depending on the quantum of the income streams that you declare to SNIT and hence pay the premium on it, it is that same quantum of income stream that is going to be used to pay you when you retire. So, you know, because in the past, maybe people did not understand how it works, and in fact, and hence thought that because there were not many good stories out there for where people said, oh, I've gone on pension, I'm on the SNIT scheme, and look at me, I am so happy. People tended to buy into the narrative that, oh, as for this SNIT people, you give them their money, you are throwing it away. Yeah. You're better off keeping it under a mattress or buying treasury bills or something, right? And you end up getting something better, right? So what that has led to is that employees even connive with their employers to say, just pay whatever little that you can pay so that these SNIT people, you can get them off your back. And whatever it is that you don't pay, you give it to me on the tabletop or give it to me in some kind of an allowance, right? And then, you know, I can get a lot of money to live now. But today they forget that one day, retirement will come. And when you come and you say, give me the income stream that I insured, the only income stream we are going to see on your record is the ones that you declare to us, right? And so if you connived and you paid only on a very small amount, then when you leave, you're only going to get a reflection of that small amount.
I'll be coming to the regulator and where we should move this thing from the moral suasion to enforcing people, because I hear the Director General, I hear the Chief Executive, I hear players, oh, let's encourage people to pay more. If you realize that what people are paying is not good enough, should the regulator come in and be tough on that? I'll be coming back to you on that one. This is the business edition of PM Express. I'm here with the Chief Executive of the National Pensions Regulatory Authority and the Director General of SNIT, Dr. Frederick Nkran, and also Leslie Mensah. He is a senior economist at the Institute of Fiscal Studies, and they are joining us to have a discussion on pensions in Ghana. Is it about regulation or ensuring that I pay more so at the end of the day, I get the best? We'll also be going on social media to see the comments there from our viewers out there. This is the business edition of PM Express. We'll be back after this break. It's the business edition of PM Express, and we are looking at whether improving pensions benefits in the country, regulation, or you just have to pay more. Dr. Frederick Nkran is the Director General of the SNIT. He's here with me in studio, and also the Chief Executive of the National Pensions Regulatory Authority, the regulator. And the analyst, the person who has sat back, look at the numbers, look at the contributions, look at the whole country, who is paying and who is not paying, and what we need to do. Leslie Mensah, he's a senior economist at the Institute of Fiscal Studies, and all of them are joining us in these discussions on how to improve the benefits. Do you think that people have to pay more, or the laws are not biting enough to ensure that we benefit from this? Doc, I was coming to, and you're trying to explain something to me. There's this talk, I mean, I've seen this moral appeal from the regulator and even you yourself, that people should pay more salaries. I mean, why don't we get to the place where the law is reviewed so that everything is put together, the benefits are enhanced? Doc, why are you not making that call? Push it to the regulator.
Well, this is a conversation that we have to have, right? But you always have to start from where you are now and interrogate. And then maybe once you make the facts very clear to people, and people understand that this is the cause, this is a lever that we can tweak to get better results, then maybe the conversation can gain traction. Let me, with your permission, let me share some statistics with you, right?
And that will be rolling on the screen for our viewers as well.
Yes. So, George, if I told you that 25% of Ghanaian workers who contribute to the SNIT scheme tell SNIT that they are making 400 Ghana cedis or less. Will that surprise you?
Yes,
25%. A quarter of the working population in Ghana, to the extent that the people on
the lines are there if you help us with the color coding that we are seeing on the screen right now.
If you look at the red line, the red line shows the distribution of pensions that we paid in February 2019.
Okay.
Right? So this is real data. This is right from our database. And then the black line shows a distribution of salaries on which people paid contributions in the same month, right? What you can see is that we get out of this chart is that you look at the first bottom left, you find out that 25% of workers who contributed in February 2019 said that they were earning salaries which were 400 Ghana cedis or less. And what that means is that they are telling us that is the salaries that support their lifestyle. Yes. That's even the gross. It's not net, that's gross. And then if you go further, you find out that 50% of all the contributors, 50% said they were taking earning gross salaries of 1,000 Ghana cedis or less. 50% of all the workers.
In the formal sector.
This is in the formal sector. In the formal sector, 50% gross salaries 1,000 Ghana cedis or less. Now, 71% of people in the formal sector says they are earning 1,800 Ghana cedis or less, right? So that is the reality of the salaries.
And those color codes are on the screen. Yes. We have the green, and if you can just run us through for those who might be having challenges with the green, the yellow, the blue, and then the orange as well, as in what you collect and the salary levels that you realize for those who are contributing to the tier 1 of the SNID pension scheme.
Right. So the first part that I've put in green is that approximately 25% are contributing on salaries 400 or less, but then just oppose it against the pensions, because people always say, oh, the pensions are low, the pensions are low, but then they forget the other side of the equation. So let's look at the pensions.
So the pensions are higher.
The 25% of pensioners today, the bottom earning pensioners, are actually earning more than 25% of the people in active service. Because as you can see, the red line is actually more to the right than the black line. Because our minimum pension is 300 Ghana cedis, all right? And 25% of the pensioners are earning between 300 and 400 Ghana cedis. Whereas people in active service are saying that they are even earning less. There are people that are contributing on minimum wage. You know those people that say, okay, let me give you something small. So it's better for some people to be on pension than to be working.
Let me bring in, I'll be coming back to you about whether time has come for us to again look at the 3-tier pension scheme as a player, because we were so excited from the beginning. MPRA, I mean, you look at the laws. Do you think the time has come to review the law so that we can just put everything gross together? People should not be flimsy excuses separating allowances, so that we get the true value of what people are earning, so that the reductions again is done, and then we can benefit, or I can benefit when I go home, than paying me 1,000 Ghana cedis as salary and taking home like 9,000 Ghana cedis boxed up in allowances. What are you doing about it, MPRA?
Well, George, thank you very much. The law is dynamic. Of course,
so it can be reviewed.
I take a sociological view about the law because it is for the benefit of society. We have worked with the law for almost 10 years now. We can have a conversation about it. We can have a national conversation. Of course, the law itself was a creature or the creation of agitation, I mean, way back in 2004. But I believe that maybe we need to get the law to work a little bit and then begin to see, because 2020 is actually where the first batch of those who came under Act 76 as amended will be going on mandatory retirement. Now, there is a Tier 2 and those who have taken advantage of Tier 3, and in the same way as Doc was alluding to, those who understood the Tier 1 and actually declared their real income. That is where they're going to see the benefits of it. So, I mean, we shouldn't throw the baby away with the bathwater.
But when I look at these numbers,
yes, you will look at the numbers. Yeah, you look at the numbers.
I am afraid.
But the thing about pensions is that if pensions become the result of agitation, growth and sustainability become an issue. So I would say that come 2020, when the first batch of 60-year-olds take their Tier 1 benefit and take their Tier 2 lump sum, and maybe if they have the Tier 3 lump sum add to it, then we can begin to have a conversation about the effect of these new.
But don't you think that the time has come for us to look at this bit of the law about putting this? Don't you think we should look at that?
Yeah, the conversation should continue. Of course, the law has been reviewed once in 2014.
But should we do it again?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is what I'm saying.
Let me go to Leslie Mensah, and I'll come back quickly to my guest in studio. Leslie, let me get your final thought in 2 minutes, or maybe even in a minute, whether you think that the laws itself are not aiding the growth of the sector. You think it should be reviewed? There's talk about people paying peanuts as salary and then boxing everything in allowances. In just about 2 minutes, Leslie.
Well, I'll say that we should continue to take stock. You know, we have implemented the law for close to a decade, you know, as the regulator said. We should continue to take stock. Next year will be a watershed, you know, when the players in the second tier, you know, make their first payouts to the beneficiaries. And for a lot of us, we'll be interested to see how those benefits that will be paid compare with what would have been available, you know, had those contributions been made under the SNIT system, you know, as prevailed in the past, you know. And when we get there, we'll see to what extent, you know, those outcomes will inform whether certain changes have to be made to investment rules, etc. But I believe many people in the industry have been taking stock over the years, you know, and certainly a time will come when it will be ripe to make changes or adjustments, you know. This issue of how we define the pensionable salary, whether to include the allowances that are paid, is a very important issue. It requires a conversation by all the stakeholders, the government, the unions, the regulator, the employers, because of the implications it has. So that we can reach some consensus.
Thank you so much. I have to end it here with you, and let me get back to my guest in studio. I'll come back to you for the last word, and let's look at social media quickly before I come back to the in studio. You have Precious and Cancer says, if I may ask, why is SNIT not taking the Tier 3? Some agitations for you there. Some people want you to take that one. Da Costa or Paris says, customer service at the various SNIT offices are poor. Trust me. Customer feedback for you. Let's go down and see what else is Da Costa saying. People do not want to pay because it's difficult assessing your funds at the end of the day. So those are just some few comments from our social media page. I'll come back to you, Mr. Crawford, on you having the final word. But Doc, you support the fact that the review should happen very soon, or maybe self-government now.
No, yeah, I mean, I support the fact that the conversation have to be had. We have to have a serious conversation about what income streams you are ensuring, just so that everything can be put in perspective and blame can be put where it is due, right? Because, listen, look, there's a reason why people are trying to separate allowances and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, for the employer, they have to pay the matching funds on it, and then they have to pay taxes on it, because some of these allowances are even not taxed. So it comes at another cost to the employer. And then for the for the employees who may be a little short-sighted, they may say, oh, don't take the additional 5% or 5.5% off my, because I need it now. But we need to know that they have to plan for the future. Retirement, whether you like it or not, will come.
Thank you. 30 seconds, way forward. Regulator, 30 seconds.
Well, I mean, obviously we need to look at the law, we need to look at behavior of contributors, and then we need to see if what we have here is actually working, so that we can all have one conversation in the same way as the Act was created. If there's a need for us to look at some of the provisions of the Act and make sure that we get retirement benefits which give us security in our old age, that is always what NPR is.
It looks like time flies when you're having fun and having a very interesting topic, but it looks like this might not be the last. It looks like we still have to have a part 2 of this, and all too soon we have to draw the curtain down on the business edition of PM Express with my distinguished personalities here, Dr. Freetin Kran of SNAIT, and also Satakrofa of NPR, and Leslie Mensah with the Institute of Fiscal Studies. Thank you, distinguished personalities, for enriching this discussion. My name is George Yafia. I hope you enjoyed this, and I know the debate and the questions will still be out there for us to get some answers to.
It's the